Basic Brewing Radio is sponsored in part by the American Homebrewers Association. Now through August 31st, boost your brewing IQ with a free book when you join or renew your American Homebrewers Association membership. Choose from 3 books by the best brewing educators. Ray Daniels' Designing Great Beers, The Ultimate Guide to Brewing Classic Beer Styles. Stan Hieronymus' Brewing Local, American-Grown Beer. Or, For the Love of Hops, Practical Guide to Aroma, Bitterness, and the Culture of Hops. Visit homebrewersassociation.org/basicbrewing to redeem this limited-time offer. homebrewersassociation.org/basicbrewing. Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, August 11th, 2022. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Malcolm Frazer of Farm Brewing in Pittsburgh gets dark in the second part of our interview. We'll darken the color of the 2 miles that we compare at least. Then we lighten it up with a New England IPA brewed with Galaxy and Nelson Sauvin. If you go to basicbrewing.com, you can find archives of our audio and video shows. If you go to basicbrewingshop.com, you can find our DVDs and our brewer's logbooks. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Basic Brewing and find our show page on Facebook as well. If you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing. And many thanks to everybody who's helping out in that way. If you go to patreon.com/basicbrewing, you can see a long list of stuff that you can access if you sign up as a supporter. This week I'm planning to brew a cream ale to celebrate our 30th wedding anniversary later this month. That's right, Susan has chosen to tolerate me for 3 decades. Oh, bless her heart. Believe it or not, we still have part of our wedding cake in our basement freezer from 1992. I'm literally going to have to dig it out from the frost that's accumulated around it. It's in a plastic bowl with foil over it. We haven't looked at it in decades, but I want to taste it. I'm pretty sure it's going to be all dried out, maybe nasty, but I don't think it'll kill me if I try it. I mean, Elaine on Seinfeld ate some of that old cake Mr. Peterman bought at auction, and she didn't die, right? She didn't lick any stamps either, but anyway, to pair with the old cake, I'm brewing a cream ale with 10 pounds or 4.5 kilograms of Pilsen malt, a pound or 450 grams of flaked maize, and some Hallertau tradition hops for bittering and a tiny bit of flavor. I bought a packet of Viking from our friends and sponsors at Imperial Organic Yeast. The local homebrew store did have it this time, even though it's been very popular. I couldn't find it last time they were sold out. Most of the time with Kvike, I ferment outside in the summer heat. It's kind of a stunt more than anything else, but I'm going to do an experiment this time and ferment in the basement, where I think it's around 70 degrees Fahrenheit or 21 C. And I'm wondering if the Viking will behave more like a traditional yeast in fermentation speed and flavor and aroma characteristics. It should show up well in this recipe. It's pretty plain as far as, there are no crazy flavors in this one. You know we love Imperial Organic Yeast with 200 billion cells and each easy-to-open package. My stir blade is dusty because I don't use it anymore to make starters for moderate gravity 5-gallon batches. And my airlocks are usually bubbling before bedtime. We'll see what happens this time with the Kvike at the cooler temperature. Ask your local homebrew store about Imperial Organic Yeast, Kviking, and their new I-22 Capri Hybrid Yeast. Find out all the details at imperialyeast.com. That's imperialyeast.com. And I'm going to be brewing that beer on my Warthog Brew-in-a-Bag electric brewing system from our friends and sponsors Desiree and Dave from highdgravitybrew.com. You know I love my Warthog system. I'm planning to turn the mash mode of my Warthog EBC 130 controller to 150 degrees Fahrenheit or 65 C. And dough into 8 gallons or 30 liters of water. And as I'm loading the grain into the kettle and, fighting the dough balls, my Blickman boil coil in my Warthog system is keeping up the temperature so that when I'm done assembling the mash, I'm back at my target temp automatically. I'm spoiled. And since I've got a pound of flaked maize in there, I will be monitoring the gravity of the mash, especially near the end of the hour-long rest, with a refractometer. If it looks like the gravity's still rising, I'm going to hang out for a few minutes more. Some people say that you can get away with a short mash, but I'm greedy. I like to get as much gravity out of my grain as possible. And since my tap water for chilling is so warm nowadays, I'll probably, after knocking off the initial heat with tap water or hose water, I'll probably recirculate ice water with my pond pump through the immersion chiller to reach my target pitching temperature. Boy, I love my electric system, my Warthog electric system from HighGravityBrew.com. It takes the pain out of propane. And if you use the code EBC75BB, you can save $75 off your own Warthog system or controller at HighGravityBrew.com. That's family-owned and operated, HighGravityBrew.com. Okay, after tasting all those golden-colored beers in the first part of this interview, Malcolm Frazer, Steve Wilkes, Zod O'Connor, and I moved on to some delicious darker session beers in the second part of our tasting at Hop Farm Brewing in Pittsburgh. Okay, Malcolm Frazer, we're back here at the Hop Farm in Pittsburgh, or nearby. Are we officially in Pittsburgh?
We're in Lawrenceville, which is like a little subset of Pittsburgh. Yes.
but for those where'd you grow up in Kansas City? Raytown. But you still say Kansas City.
Yeah, because nobody's ever heard of Raytown.
There you go.
This is the first time I've ever heard of Raytown.
There you go.
My point exactly.
So we and Mel, we've lost Mel. Unfortunately, she's gone to help with an event that's happening here at the brewery. So this is the extended content. Either it's going to be another episode, or it's going to be bonus content. But what are we up to now?
So, unfortunately, the previous panel was all monochromatic, mostly yellow stuff, and that was a failing on my part. But I really wanted to get these two milds into your face holes, and I'm really happy with them. But they're different, and that's why I wanted to taste them. I thought it'd be kind of nerdy to talk about two different milds, two different ways to make a mild. So one of them is called Pub Games, and it was brewed for an event that we had. That was basically just pub games. We have this warehouse space, and we had darts and foosball and pool and a giant version of beer pong and just kind of a bunch of fun, irreverent stuff. And we had a couple of different pub ales. We had the Pub Games mild. We had Wiley Tennant, which is a golden. Wiley Tennant is a British pale ale, and then we had this Charming Ale, which is a British golden ale. So
I remember reading an article, probably in Zymergy, and I think that Jamil Zainashev wrote it, and this is way back in the day, about English milds, and they sounded so delicious that I wanted to make one. I wanted to have one. I'm not sure that I ever really accomplished that, but so talk to me about this style. I mean, what is it, and what makes it what it is?
Well, I'm almost afraid to talk about it too much because there's some people who are real more into the history and the style, and they've done the research. Ron Pattinson, famously from Shut Up About Barclay Perkins, Martin Cornell from Zythophile, I think it is. But anytime you talk about these styles, you have to say, when are you talking about? Are you going to sit there and ping this style on which time frame? Especially a beer that's like 300-400 years old are better, right? So, what beer are you talking about? Which brewery was making it, and what time frame, right? So, to me, a mild is a darker English beer. Almost, and like I said, this will give it side eye from some people, almost like a mini porter, But really, I mean, like I said, you have to almost talk about the brewery and the time frame, So to me, I would say a mild has some cocoa, almost no roast, a little bit of caramel. I often get this like Coca-Cola Dr. Pepper flavor. And then depending on when you're talking about, it's either highly attenuated and low alcohol or low attenuated and low alcohol. But there have been milds that have been high in alcohol. So, it's really confusing to people. Are we going to talk about the homebrew version of mild? Which is the BJCP gets attacked sometimes for trying to just, rein things in too much, but it's for competition purposes, right? It's not a history lesson.
Right.
So for the sake of competition, you have to kind of, tighten it up a little bit so that people have a target, so you can judge to a target, right? Otherwise, you'd have to have like 4 different milds, right? I think if the beer has some dark caramel, like English caramel, English toffee flavors, lower carbonation, hopefully, mostly nowadays lower alcohol flavor, lower alcohol content, almost no hops. And if it does have hops, it's like EKG or Fuggles, right? It should have a base malt, a biscuity base malt like Maris Otter or Golden Promise. But I do not claim to be expert on the style. Yeah, I do not.
Well, I talked to Peter Simons, who is British but lives in Australia now, and has done research actually in the archives of old, English, and British, breweries. And you're exactly right. According to his research, it's not where it was brewed, but when it was brewed, because depending on the economy that was happening at the time, depending on regulations that were happening at the time, depending on availability of ingredients, they used adjuncts. They used, sugars back in the day. So there's all of these influences that happen, not only because of location, but because of the time and the influences of things that are going on in the economy and in the environment around that. So it is it has to be a snapshot in time of what, if you're talking about, say, an IPA, quote IPA, the original IPA, what, not only where was it being brewed, but why and when. So it's a keen observation that the if you're going to be historically accurate, that's a moving target.
Right, and in the end, to me, what I care about is it delicious? Is it drinkable? Right. If you're getting a little bit off mic a little while ago, we were talking about vanity projects and brewer flex. You could make something that you pick a target, and there was a certain mild that was like 50% attenuation, and it was only 3.8% alcohol, or maybe less, 2.8% alcohol, and it was chewy. And you could say it was almost like, the story of the old porter, like, oh, they used to use this beer to give themselves nourishment and calories, whatever. I was like, yeah, that's not going to sell, so I don't want that, So I try to pick a spot where it's like drinkable and you can have 3 or 4 pints of it, and it has like the flavors. It's reminiscent of English beer, so it has the apple pear, toffee, earthy. I almost think of the English hops as like soil in a positive way, like a fresh earth, mushroomy, tilled earth, compost, I love that personally. So you have to kind of taper it a little bit for the American palate. And if you want to get more historically accurate, I think the beer should have some brown malt in it, which the American palate doesn't always like. It's very leathery, dirt, a little bit acrid. I just find it amazing. It smells like a wet leather jacket. It's just great. Pipe tobacco. Like Cavendish.
Yeah. So I think that this is the pub games here, and I think, what is the other one?
Okay, so the other one, we had a homebrew competition, Trash, Three Rivers Alliance of Serious Homebrewers. It was timed for Homebrew Con, and we broke up a different category. So the Pittsburgh Brewers Guild collaborated with Trash to pick winners to do collaborations with local breweries, and we served them at Homebrew Con. And the winner of the sessionable English or UK ales was a person named Roland Warzel, and he brewed a mild, unfortunately, because we had just had a mild on tap, but I wasn't gonna welch on the commitment. So luckily the timing worked out that on draft, Pub Games was leaving. We still had some cans left. So I thought, well, how can we differentiate these? Luckily his recipe had some brown malt in it. I was like, okay, great. And I asked him about the attenuation, and I was like, so can we make this a little bit less attenuated? And he was really game. The name of his, I don't want to try to pronounce it, but he has like some Slavic roots, and the name was the Slavic word for undertaker. So I was like, that's not going to sell, because undertaker, mild, it's just not going to work. So I said, why was it called that? And he said it was from his grandfather who had recently passed away, and he was an undertaker. Oh. So I said, what was his name? And he was like, Richard. And I'm like, can I say Ode to Richard or For Richard? Right? So this has an English crest on it, For Richard, so it will sell. But on the side, it tells the story of Roland's grandfather. And we basically said, hey, this is for him, ode to him. So kind of got to me a little bit, it was nice, But this beer, so For Richard is less attenuated. It's a 3.7 Plato finishing gravity, whereas Pub Games is like 2.1. But they're both around 4%. So hopefully we'll talk about your perceptions of the two.
I posted a picture on Instagram of the case of meads and honey beverages I got from our friends and sponsors Ricky and Kelly of Groenfell and Havoc Meaderies in Vermont. Susan and I sampled some of them last night, and boy, they were delicious, of course. The new honey spritzers are tasty, light, and refreshing. And the maple root of all evil is spicy, and the maple flavors are very well balanced. It's really good at room temperature where you can get all those delicate, subtle flavors. But there's exciting news from Groenfell. They're working on bourbon barrel-aged Veneer. You might remember Veneer is a 15.9% mead from the Ancient Collection that's made from raw wildflower honey and aged already on ash wood and oak staves. Well, imagine that aging in a bourbon barrel. Early reviewers are saying things like, it's straight bourbon in a glass, neat, followed by wildflowers. And they say if honey bourbons were really, really good, this is what they could hope to be. Wow. Bourbon Barrel Veneer is on pre-sale now, and there's a very limited amount of it. So do yourself a favor and go to Groenfell.com and reserve yours. That's at family-owned and operated Groenfell.com. That's Groennfell. So again, I think this one is the Pub Games, and so let's taste this first. Oh, that's really good. Zot first.
So, a mild, you talked about being earthy, and it's one of those words I try to use the word celery sometimes instead of earthy because it's much more like crisp and clean, but this is more, as you said, mushroom earth. Like, it really is there. I've heard some people even describe it as muddy, but in a good way. This doesn't do that. It is a very thorough beer. I feel like I've had a full beer. I don't feel like I've had a session, and I don't feel like I've been cheated. And it's just got so much malt characteristic and complexity to it. And I know how hard that is in a small beer, so that's very impressive. You could tell somebody this is almost a porter, and they'd be like, "Cool, got to be very careful because that's a big beer, right?" And they wouldn't know.
Zot's spot on. The beer is delicious. I don't claim to be an expert on English milds either, but my perception of them or my understanding of them is that they're 2 to 4% beers, somewhere in that area. I think of them as a beer that you've been out working all day. You go to the pub for a couple of pints, maybe, and I don't want to get hit on this too hard, but a little bit like a Guinness in Ireland. It's not a big heavy beer. It's clearly a dark beer, but something that you can have a few pints of at the end of the day, and again, you're not going to fall off the couch. That's what this beer is. and it's delicious, and it's an English beer. It is very much an English beer. When one of the things, this is a little change of topic, but one of the things I want to talk about a little bit is I've noticed in your menu, in the palette of the menu here, that you have a lot of different countries that you're pulling from, and that has to be a challenge. That, you know, how do you approach that? I mean, you know, it's not an English brewery, it's not a German brewery, it's not a Polish brewery, but you appear to be pulling it off pretty damn well.
That's very nice to say, Steve. I just like the classics. I'm a home brewer at heart, so I brewed everything. I literally did brew through brewing classic styles. Literally, like, you know, not in order, but I brewed all the recipes. That's how I was learning, right? And, you know, I've talked to other people about a little bit. One of the downfalls of that book is a lot of people started brewing the same recipes, which is not necessarily what homebrewers are about. But I was like, but this is a standard place to start, and then you could kind of almost adjust your skill level based on a known quantity. It's like, this is a good recipe. Like, we know this recipe is okay, so can you pull it off? And if you, it's like going to cook's country for cooks. You know, can you make this delicious? No, your fault, not the recipe's fault, right? So with brewing classic styles, I started branching out, and I started going into historical references like Ron Pattinson and Martin Cornell's Zythophile, and some of the fringe stuff. You know, the people who are more focused on certain styles. You know, Milk the Funk for farmhouse and sour and funky beers, right? So it's like start at someplace, a known quantity, and branch. So with all these classics, I basically just said, I want to brew a wide palette to appeal to a lot of different people. We are not a British brewery. You know, we are not a German brewery. I love, like, my primary passion is probably farmhouse and sour beers, but I also want to drink a lot of beer sometimes. So I'll do a golden ale, a British golden ale, you know. But you also have to sell beer. What's popular right now? New England IPAs and fruited sours. But if I'm going to do them, I'm going to try to do right by them. You know, I'm not going to make a gloopy smoothie beer. It's going to be something you can drink 2 or 3 pints of. So we have Unbirthday on right now. It's called a Very Merry Unbirthday, which is an allusion to Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland. Yeah. But it's a Berliner base, but I use, instead of a lot of puree, we used fruited tea. So it's a desiccated fruit tea. And you see people walking by with it. It's like a bright pink, you know, but it's very well attenuated. You know, you can drink a lot of it. 6.2% alcohol, you know. So, yeah, I'm just a nerd and a sensory fanatic. So I want you to be able to, like you said, drink a lot of it. You know, hopefully, you know, I want your money.
Well, one thing we haven't talked about is the yeast character of the beer. And it is a, you know, sort of quote unquote fruity character of the beer. It's not overly, you know, overpowering in that method, or in that direction. But it's not a USO5. You know, it's not a Chico fermented beer. It's not an American brown ale or something like that. There is a bit of an estery character that is complementary to the style, don't you think?
Hopefully, yeah. So with Roland's recipe, I wanted to use what he used, and I believe, hopefully someone can look it up for me. I think it's Fuller's 1968. I think it's YE's 1968. So his is a little less attenuated, a little more fruit forward. It's like that jammy marmalade character, whereas the Pub Games, which was my old homebrew recipe, is a little more neutral. It's a British Ale 5 from Omega, which I think is like the London Ale 3 that everyone uses for New England. So I used this from a pitch off of that, and it attenuated a little better, and it's a little less ester forward. Yeah.
Yeah, they're both from the same family, and I would say, you know, that the and unfortunately I drank all of the first one. Oh, here we go. But yeah, they're both in the same family. I think you could say by drinking them together, you would say they're from the same style. They are not
So I looked it up. Y Yeast 1968 was London ESB. I believe that's Fuller's strain. Yeah.
But again, I could drink pint after pint of either of these. And they're delicious.
Does anyone pick up that brown malt character on Richards?
So the beauty of this is, as you said at the beginning, that we can actually compare two milds against each other, and you never get two milds in the same pub. Like, this is literally only a homebrew thing that I've ever done. And you say they're from the same family, but I could tell them apart from just the smell. Right. So the smell of, I'm super sensitive to coffee. I don't like coffee. It's the roast of the beans. And this has a...
Which one?
The For Richard. Definitely has a roast character to it, which I assume is coming from the brown malt, possibly from somewhere else. But I could literally tell the glasses apart by just smelling. It has a much... that roast character goes all the way through the beer, and definitely is a kind of more roasty, not even just toast, but compared to your mild, the pub games. And having both together, it's very obvious. Now, if they were a day apart, I might not be able to distinguish. Right. And just to be clear, just to annoy you, I immediately mixed that one with the habanero. Because I thought that extra body that it has would really hold up against the habanero, and it does. So just let your customers know.
Yeah. Have you ever had mole? Yeah. Chocolate and spice works, man.
Yeah. There's some cinnamon and star anise. And
so the other brewery, I'm a part of 412, the brewer Ryan Slicker, we did a mole stout, and it was a bunch of ancho and a habanero and cocoa. We got cocoa from a local chocolatier. So, that works too. Yeah.
Wow. Well, both are very good. And, I'm to be honest, I'm after all of the beers, I'm experiencing palate fatigue. So coming into it fresh, and I'm not a trained judge like Mr. O'Connor over here, but I can see where you're coming from. Does that make the Full Richard more of a leaning toward a porter or a stout for you, if you're being picky? And not that you'd be picky.
So whenever I judge, I have to be careful because I know my dislike of coffee. I think I'm just super sensitive, which is why I don't like coffee. I would the pub games is actually much more of a traditional mild by BJCP style guidelines, and that doesn't mean it isn't more people wouldn't like the roasty character coming out of the other one. Again, what sells versus just because I would score it differently. For me, it's a bit distracting for a mild. But I know what a mild is, and I'm that guy walking into your pub. Although I have a feeling you have a lot of that guys coming into your pub.
At this place, we do attract a decent amount of beer nerds, which can be awesome often, and sometimes it's, as you would imagine. But I love them because they do drive the industry in a lot of ways. I think we have milds because of those people. We have Grodzicki because of those people. So I'll smirk about it, But the brown ale is polarizing for the American palate. Not everyone likes that earthy dirt roast character. It's almost like coffee grounds in the compost pile. And I've talked to other brewers about that brown malt character, and we did one at Fatheads in the pilot system. We did a porter, and it wasn't popular. I almost got chastised for why'd you suggest this? This is not super popular. And that was Ohio. I think in Ohio, they're even more sensitive than Western Pennsylvania about the brown malt, and it just wasn't a very popular beer. Lesson learned, right? You gotta live and learn. So we took a little bit of a risk on this one, and I talked to Roland about it. I like to honor collabs when it's a homebrew competition. So we tried to do as much as we could to make the recipe as he brewed it. But I will admit, I did dial the brown malt back a little bit. I think he had 5 or 6%. This is 3%.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chris Colby is notoriously he doesn't like the brown ales. He said that they're kind of a compromise between styles, and they're kind of muddy, and he doesn't like them. And it's so unlike Chris Colby to speak out on things he doesn't like, but
I think I get along with Chris mostly when we argue. I actually respect people who have bold opinions. I find them entertaining. But what we tried to do is, one, you control the pH. If you do a darker beer for home brewers, I would resist going very low on your mash pH and your eventual final pH. So I like to mash around 5.4, 5.5 with darker beers. And what I find in my experience, coupled with good healthy fermentation, is you can start to tell the layers of malt character. So if you don't do that, if you have poor fermentation and you have a lot of esters stomping all over the malt, and you have too low of a pH and you get into that acid phase, what I find is it's more acrid and more one note. Someone call my I'd like to hear it. It's fine. But when your pH is a little bit higher, so if you're at 5.4, 5.5, instead of your residual beer being around 3.8, 3.9, which is low, but that happens with very dark beers, if you have softer water without a lot of buffering, is your final pH on your beer will be like 4.2, 4.3. And I, in my opinion, I can smell it. I can literally smell it, which makes no sense. You shouldn't be able to smell pH, but it's the impact on the malt character. And then when you taste it, I can start to differentiate the caramel, the brown malt, the cocoa, the chocolate. Like I said, someone call me a liar. We'll talk about it. It'll be fun.
Ella from Tavor says there are some delicious selections available for you to pick up this month. Ella says that they have some stellar, refreshing IPAs coming from Moonraker and Barrier Brewing Company, as well as plenty of beautiful stouts from the likes of Junkyard and Bottle Logic for those who still love dark beers in the summer heat. That's me. Or you can save them for the fall. Tavor is not a Beer of the Month club where someone picks beers for you. You sign up by going to Tavor.com. That's T-A-V as in Victor, O-U-R.com, or downloading the Tavor app. You'll see new beers each day. When you see something that you like, and you will, click on it to add it to your crate, and your beers will ship in a few days to save shipping as your crate fills up. It doesn't cost anything to sign up, and there's no obligation to purchase anything. In fact, if I can ask you a favor, go to Tavor.com, T-A-V as in Victor, O-U-R.com, or download the app, and when you sign up, enter the promo code BASIC BREWING, that's all one word, and you'll get $10 off your first shipment of $25 or more. Again, it's free to sign up, and there's no obligation to purchase. Sign up at Tavor.com or with the Tavor app and enter BASIC BREWING as the promo code. Now, Gordon Strong recommends doing the mash with the base malt or the lighter malts, and then adding the darker malts in the sparging step if you're still doing a sparge stage.
So Gordon recommended that primarily in his Brewing Better beer book, and I think it's a technique to be used for certain beers, especially big beers, because that will really impact your mash pH. And it is a good technique for people who don't have sophisticated pH adjustments, right? So if you want to just kind of dial in a mash pH and use your base malt and your home water, that's great. Some pro brewers are a little bit more persnickety, and we will have a mash pH. We'll do a pH adjustment in the kettle sometimes. Sometimes we'll acidify our sparge water, right? So if that works for you, it's a great tool. So that it's a good tool. It's a good technique, and it simplifies beer making for a lot of people. So I think it's a tool, and you should use it.
I was actually going to ask almost the same exact question. Also, just recently, based off a conversation you're having, it was cold steeping the darker malts for the same exact reason, but I don't know if you can do that at a pro brewer scale.
Cold steep, I've done it. So I use a lot of my homebrew techniques. I made a beer a little while ago. It was supposed to be kind of a Tim Taylor's Landlord clone, but Tim Taylor's Landlord, they use according to emails and correspondence with their brew team, they use Golden Promise, right? And I kind of laughed and said, I know I've made a lot of single malt beers. If I use 100% Golden Promise like you advertise and as you're claiming, this beer will not be copper. And Tim Taylor's Landlord is copper. It's a light copper. It'll be gold. And they said, well, we do two things. One, we have our own gold to promise, brewed to our malted to our specs. And two, we have an aggressive boil, and they call their kettle the copper. They say we boil hard in the copper, and we pick up some color and flavor there. So depending on your brew system, you can't do that. So what we did is we cold steeped some dark malt. And I specifically asked them, I said, do you use any, because British brewers use caramel flavoring, caramel coloring. I said, do you do that? They said, absolutely not. I took them at their word. So I did, because I wanted that color. So I did a cold steep with some crystal malts and a little bit of black patent.
How did it come out?
Delicious and nutritious. But it was not a Tim Taylor clone. I have to admit, it was good. It was a good British beer, but the quest continues.
And this style obviously is not about the hops, right? But talk about the hopping strategies.
No, this is like 12, 15 IBU. I mean, I know what the number said on the machine, but I didn't get it analyzed. But I think if you didn't use British hops, you would miss them. But this is not a hop showcase. This is a malt showcase.
Yeah.
This beer is malt, a little bit of fermentation. Hey, hops.
So we've got another 4-pack that we haven't
This is
reached.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna rinse. I'm gonna take a little rinse water here.
I was looking back through my recipe folder file to see if I'd ever brewed a mild. I never have. At least I've never recorded a recipe. I got a ton of browns in there I've completely forgotten about, but no milds.
Which may be an indication, the fact that you've forgotten about them.
There was a kit that I sold that was, I just called it Nut Brown Ale, and it was a little nutty, and that's what I called it. And I sold a ton of them. So I got that, but I didn't have a mild. And so, anyway, I was just trying to do some math.
So what do we drink now?
This is what the kids want. This is a New England IPA. So not only is it a New England IPA, it has cheater hops, to steal a phrase from the Sapwood guys. But I've been using that phrase for a while as well. They stole the name first, good for them. But this is Galaxy and Nelson Sauvin, both from New Zealand. And it has like that. It has that New Zealand gooseberry diesel-y thing going on, but it's also smack full of tropical fruit.
Yeah, it's juicy. It's the definition of juicy.
If you go either to the archives or wait for the future, I use that same exact term without knowing anyone else with the Imperial Yeast Capri piece, and I said, you cheated with these hops, and it was Amarillo and Galaxy.
This is dessert after those little mild ales. This is like I'm drinking a little dessert. Yeah. Super good. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a beer. We jokingly call a lot of these beers adjective nouns. And actually our next beer is adjective noun, so no, TM. But a lot of our beers have some kind of weird adjective, like, neon turtles, our punk rock rhino. This is punk rock rhino, and it is I think 15% flaked oats, 15% flaked wheat. The rest, the other portion is a split between Pilsner and it's Barkay, because we had it in stock. Barkay Pilsner and Raw Arturo, 6.5% ABV. All the hop. So I use a little bit of first wort hop in most of my beers. That's a whole other conversation. But I use a little bit of first wort hop, and then the rest of it's all kettle. So it's like maybe 5-10 IBUs first wort. I like to use a Noble hop for that, or a Noble-esque hop for that. And then the rest of it is all Nelson and Galaxy. So
and what's the hopping strategy? Where do you put them?
So we do, depending on the beer, right, what we're trying to do, 30-minute or 45-minute whirlpool, and we just layer it. So it's almost like the continuous addition. So we do like a 45, a 30, a 15, and at the end. And then...
So all post-boil, essentially.
Except for the first wort hop, it's all post-boil. Right. Trying to keep the bitterness soft, but I don't like no bitterness. So that's why I do a little first wort. And you do pick up, obviously we know now, you pick up a considerable amount of bitterness, not only in the whirlpool, but also dry hop. Go listen to, or go read some Scott Janish stuff for that, or Stan Hieronymus. But yes, all whirlpool. We actually knocked down to 180 for the whirlpool.
Oh, interesting.
Yep. And do that. So... And then we adjust the beers. We're always sampling and tasting the beers along the whole process. That is something I learned not only as a home brewer, but it was really drilled into us at Fatheads. Always tasting, always smelling, always sampling. and adjust, right? So we use our best, highest quality hops in dry hop, and then our next best quality in whirlpool, and so on, right? The older, the less pungent, the less desirable, it goes further up into the boil, and then obviously bad stuff we don't use. But every day before we dry hop, every day before we do a whirlpool edition, we smell, rub, and talk about it, you know. So we got some great hops here. The Nelson was from friends of ours down the road, Old Thunder. He had some great Nelson. He knew I was looking for some. He's like, hey, you want some? I was like, yep. And the Galaxy was from Yakima. These hops were in great shape. I don't get the diesel that is characteristic of some New Zealand hops. There's a little bit there. I mean, you can't get away from it. It's a little bit of that gooseberry diesel-y, enough to say, hey, this is New Zealand, but this is almost all a tropical fruit to me. It's pineapple, it's apricot, stone fruit, you know.
Yeah. Super good. And in a conversation with either Scott or Mike from Sapwood Cellars, I can't remember which, but they talked about they had plans, you know, to do a brew a certain way, and then they go to the freezer or they go to the cooler and they smell the hops, and it's like, oh, well, maybe not. And you gotta change your plans if the hops aren't ready, it's not what you're looking for. The beer is going to be different, but that's the way it goes that day. We've
done that a lot here, and I try to pass along what I've learned from people smarter and more experienced, better than me, like the guys at Terrapin and the guys at Fatheads. And when you're at Fatheads, when you're at a brewery like that, you have access to a lot of other colleagues, so you're always learning from them, and so you're always smelling, always rubbing, and you might be thinking you're using a Zaka that day, and unless it's a known brand, right, you're kind of locked in. If you're brewing a beer that's a locked-in known brand, you know, so obviously you should be looking at that ahead of time, right? But if it's a one-off, or if it's a new project that you're kind of create a brand, you might think you're using a Zaka that day, and you go smell it, you're like, no, we're not. Right. You know, this is oniony, this is cheesy, this is whatever, you know, whatever it is. This is too herbal. You know, we were using some hops a couple of days ago, and they were supposed to go in Whirlpool, and they were way too medicinal and herbal. So we switched, you know. We try to keep some constants in-house that we know are good from a known source, so we can rely on them. Mosaic is very reliable right now for us. So a lot of our beers have some Mosaic in it. It's kind of like a bellwether, you know.
But you know, of course, that hazy beers are ruining craft beer.
Oh, man, that's a long conversation.
I always have to say that. Every time I talk to a professional brewer about hazy beers, I say, you know, hazy beers are ruining craft beer, and they say, well, our customers don't think so.
Well, they're filling the register up. So I actually, so I've told this joke before, so pardon me if you've ever heard it. I don't assume you've heard me speak before, but on Brewlosophy, I said, you know what, I actually love hazy New England IPAs. It's like 5% of them are really, really good. You know? And it's the other 95% giving it a bad name.
Well, but, and one of the best hazy beers that I had was a tasting in a hotel room with you guys with the name Coffee comes to mind.
Yeah, Bill Coffee.
Many apologies to Ed Coffee, not Bill Coffee, who brewed that delicious New England IPA that we tasted in the hotel room those many years ago. Thanks, Ed. Sorry.
Yeah. He actually was brewing. I should actually reach out to him. I haven't talked to him in a while. He was at Green. Where was it? I'm gonna get it. Kelly Green Brewing. Kelly Green Brewing in out in East PA, I think. Yeah. He was a really smart guy, really talented brewer. He had a lot of connections out east with a lot of those breweries who were doing great things out there. So he had some insider knowledge, but he was making some really great hoppy beers and really great mixed fermentation beers too. But I remember that. I remember doing that, and he had some amazing beers that day.
Yeah. There you go. Final thoughts.
I'm hungry.
I still hear there's a beer we're supposed to have from that other room.
Well, yeah. Okay, we've already done this, and now it's long enough to be a regular show. So congratulations.
Sorry to the Basic Brewing Radio listeners. You're going to be tortured with my voice for up to 2 episodes.
No, today was all about you, Malcolm, and I'm so happy that you made time for us, and we really appreciate the personality, the hospitality. I've had a few beers.
Almost no one appreciates my personality. But my wife liked it for like the first year.
No, and thanks to you and thanks to Mel for all this, and now we're gonna see how good the food is.
Our chef Barry Lynch is amazing. The best thing about Barry is he doesn't need any advice; he just does it. He's amazing. So hopefully you enjoy your food. I love you guys, and thank you so much for reaching out. And I'm very humbled that you guys came here and wanted to talk to me. It's very nice.
Likewise. Thanks, Malcolm.
Cheers.
Again, thanks to Malcolm, Steve, and Zot. I'm sad that Mel didn't get a chance to join us for the second part. I'm sure that she would have had a lot of good things to say, but she was busy doing stuff. We got some amazing food afterwards and sat outside. My burger was incredible. And we may or may not have had another beer. Or maybe two. Then we Ubered safely back to the hotel. What a lot of great stuff surrounding HomebrewCon this year. And next year is in San Diego at that incredible venue. Wow. Can't wait. In the meantime, if you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our mobile-friendly shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies coming your way. Check that out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. It's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. In the meantime, stay well and stay tuned. So long.